The sound of rain slamming against the pavement echoed through the empty parking lot as a woman screamed in pain, her body collapsing onto the cold concrete just inches away from the closing iron gate. Her trembling hands clutched her swollen belly, her breath breaking into sharp, desperate gasps as the security guard turned away without a second glance. The gate slammed shut with a hollow clang, sealing her out into the storm, as if her existence had just been erased. And somewhere in the distance, the faint glow of headlights began to cut through the darkness. But whether it meant help or something far worse, she had no way of knowing. Before this story begins, take a second to like and subscribe, because stories like this remind us how sometimes the people we ignore today might be the very ones who change our lives tomorrow. Her name was Emily Carter, and just a few hours before that moment, she still believed she had a home. The night had started quietly in a modest suburban house on the outskirts of Texas, where the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a worn-out wall clock filled the silence. Emily stood in the living room, her hands shaking as she held a small envelope, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. Across from her stood Daniel Carter, her husband of 5 years, his face hardened in a way she had never seen before, his jaw clenched as if holding back something darker than anger. "Daniel, please, just listen to me." Emily's voice cracked, barely rising above a whisper, her fingers tightening around the envelope as though it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "I didn't lie to you, I swear I didn't."
Daniel let out a bitter laugh, pacing back and forth like a man trapped in his own storm. "Didn't lie?" he repeated, his voice sharp, cutting through the air like glass. "Then explain this. Emily, explain how the doctor says the timeline doesn't match. Explain how I've been working double shifts for months, barely even home, and somehow you're already this far along." Emily's eyes filled with tears again, her entire body trembling as she took a step toward him. "Daniel, you know why. You know the night it happened. You came home early, remember? You said you wanted to surprise me. You said you missed me." But Daniel shook his head, his expression cold, almost unrecognizable. "I remember the dates, Emily. I remember everything, and none of it adds up." The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm outside. Emily's breath grew shallow, panic creeping into her chest as the world she knew began to crumble, piece by piece. "Are you saying—" Her voice broke completely now, barely forming the words, "Idiot, that you think I cheated on you?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked away, his eyes lingering on the door, as if the decision had already been made long before this conversation began. "I don't think," he finally said, his voice low and distant. "I know something isn't right, and I can't live like this. Emily, I can't look at you and wonder every single day if that child is mine." Emily staggered back as if his words had physically struck her. "That child is yours," she whispered, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "He's ours, Daniel. Please, don't do this." But Daniel was already walking toward the door. At first, Emily didn't understand what was happening. Her mind refused to process the reality unfolding in front of her. But when Daniel grabbed her suitcase from the corner, the one she hadn't touched in years, and threw it toward her feet, the truth hit her like a tidal wave. "You need to leave," he said, his voice empty now, stripped of all emotion. "I've already called the landlord. Your name's not on the lease anymore. You have until tonight." Emily's knees nearly gave out beneath her. "Daniel, it's midnight. Where am I supposed to go?" He didn't hesitate. "I don't know." And just like that, 5 years of love, trust, and memories were reduced to a single, heartless sentence. The hours that followed blurred into something unreal. Emily packed what little she could, her tears falling silently onto the clothes she folded with shaking hands. Every corner of the house held a memory. The couch where they had spent lazy Sundays, the kitchen where they had laughed over burnt dinners, the bedroom where they had once dreamed of a future together. And now all of it felt like it belonged to someone else. By the time she stepped outside, the rain had already begun to fall. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have anywhere to go. All she had was a suitcase, a phone with a dying battery, and the growing life inside her that depended entirely on her strength. A strength she wasn't sure she had anymore. Hours passed as she wandered through unfamiliar streets, the storm growing heavier with each step. Her shoes were soaked, her clothes clung to her skin, and the cold seeped into her bones. She tried calling a few numbers, old friends, distant relatives, but each call either went unanswered or ended in polite rejection. It was as if the world had quietly decided that she no longer belonged anywhere. And then, as the pain began, at first it was just a dull ache, something she tried to ignore. But with every passing minute, it grew sharper, more intense, until it forced her to stop in the middle of the sidewalk, her hand gripping her belly as fear surged through her veins. No, not now, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Please, not now. That's when she saw the building, a tall gated property with bright lights illuminating the entrance, its modern design standing in stark contrast to the darkness around it. It looked like a luxury residence, maybe even a private medical facility. Hope flickered inside her. Fragile but alive, she forced herself to move, each step heavier than the last, until she reached the gate. Please, she called out, her voice barely audible over the rain. I need help. The security guard approached slowly, his expression guarded, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. This is private property, he said flatly. You can't be here. Emily shook her head desperately. I'm pregnant. I think something's wrong. I just need a place to sit just for a few minutes, please. But the guard's face didn't change. You need to leave now. Tears streamed down her face as another wave of pain hit her, stronger this time, forcing her to her knees. Please, I'm begging you. For a moment it seemed like he might hesitate, but then, without another word, he turned away and began closing the gate. And that's when she collapsed. The world around her blurred, the sound of the rain, fading into a distant echo as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. Her body lay motionless on the cold ground, her hand still clutching her belly as if trying to protect the life inside her from everything that had gone wrong. And just as the gate locked shut, a black luxury car pulled up to the entrance. Its headlights illuminated the scene in stark clarity. The unconscious woman, the soaked suitcase, the guard standing frozen in place. The car door opened slowly. A pair of polished heels stepped out onto the wet pavement, followed by a woman whose presence seemed to command the air itself. She was tall, composed, her expression sharp yet unreadable, as her eyes immediately locked onto Emily's fragile form lying on the ground. Open the gate, she said, her voice calm but carrying an authority that left no room for argument. The guard hesitated. Ma'am, she's not authorized. I didn't ask for an explanation, the woman interrupted, her gaze unwavering. I gave you an instruction. Within seconds, the gate slid open. The woman walked forward without hesitation, kneeling beside Emily as the rain continued to pour around them. For a brief moment, her composed exterior cracked, something softer flickering in her eyes as she gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Can you hear me? She asked quietly. Emily's eyes fluttered open, her vision hazy, her voice barely a whisper. Please, my baby. The woman didn't waste another second. Get the car ready, she ordered sharply. Now. As the guards rushed into action, lifting Emily carefully into the back seat, the woman remained beside her, holding her hand firmly, her presence steady in the chaos. It's going to be okay, she said, her voice softer now, almost reassuring. You're safe. But as Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, one question lingered in the air. Why did a woman like her, powerful, composed, clearly someone important, look at a stranger like Emily as if this moment meant something far more than just an act of kindness? And as the car sped off into the storm, heading toward a destination Emily could no longer see, she had no idea that this encounter was about to uncover a truth so shocking. It would change everything she thought she knew about her life. The car sped through the rain-soaked streets, its tires slicing through water as flashes of lightning lit up the dark Texas sky. Inside, the world felt smaller, tighter, as if everything that mattered had been compressed into those few urgent moments. Emily's body trembled uncontrollably in the back seat, her breath uneven, her fingers gripping the edge of the leather seat as another wave of pain surged through her. Please, Emily whispered weakly, her voice barely holding together. Don't let anything happen to my baby. The woman beside her tightened her hold on Emily's hand, her calm presence standing in sharp contrast to the chaos around them. Nothing is going to happen to your baby, she said firmly, her voice carrying a quiet strength that felt almost unshakable. You hear me? You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. Emily tried to focus on her voice, but everything felt distant, like she was drifting somewhere between consciousness and darkness. The flashing lights outside blurred into streaks, and the pain in her body pulsed like a warning she couldn't escape. Ma'am, the driver called out from the front seat, his tone tense. The nearest hospital is 10 minutes away, but traffic is building up near the highway. The woman didn't hesitate. Take the private route. There's a checkpoint. I said take it. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced any further argument. The driver nodded immediately, swerving the car onto a narrow road that cut through a quieter part of the city. Emily's vision flickered as she turned her head slightly, trying to see the woman who hadn't left her side for even a second. "Why, are you helping me?" she managed to ask, her voice fragile, filled with confusion more than anything else. "You don't even know me." For a moment, the woman didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed ahead, her expression unreadable as the rain streaked across the windows. "Sometimes," she finally said softly, "helping someone isn't about knowing them." But there was something in her tone, something deeper, something personal. Emily could feel it, even in her weakened state. It wasn't just kindness, it felt like recognition. Before she could ask anything more, another sharp pain ripped through her, stronger than before, forcing a cry out of her lips. "We're losing time," the driver said urgently. "I know," the woman replied, her grip tightening. "Just keep going." The car came to a sudden stop in front of a large, brightly lit building. The doors opened before the engine had even fully shut off, as medical staff rushed out with a stretcher, their movements fast and coordinated, as if they had been expecting them. Emily was lifted carefully, her body barely responding now, her consciousness slipping further away with every second. "Stay with me, Emily," the woman's voice followed her, steady and commanding. "Don't you dare give up now." And then everything went black. The world returned slowly. At first it was just sound, the steady beeping of a monitor, the faint murmur of voices somewhere in the distance. Then came the light, soft but persistent, pressing against her closed eyelids until she couldn't ignore it anymore. Emily's eyes fluttered open. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, clean and bright, the smell of antiseptic filling the air. For a moment she didn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. But then, like a flood breaking through a dam, everything came rushing back. The house, Daniel, the rain, the pain. "My baby," she whispered suddenly, her voice cracking as panic surged through her. "Where's my baby?" "Emily." The voice was calm, controlled, but it carried enough weight to cut through her rising fear. She turned her head quickly, her heart pounding, and there she was, the same woman, standing near the window, her posture straight, her presence as composed as ever. But now, in the soft hospital light, Emily could see her more clearly. She wasn't just well-dressed. Everything about her spoke of power, precision and control, the kind of person who didn't just walk into rooms. She owned them. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "My baby," she repeated, her eyes filling with tears. The woman stepped closer, her expression softening just slightly. "Your baby is alive," she said gently, "but he came early. The doctors are monitoring him in the neonatal unit." A wave of relief crashed over Emily, so suddenly it almost hurt. Tears streamed down her face as her body relaxed for the first time in hours. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Soon," the woman replied. "The doctors want to make sure he's stable first." Emily nodded weakly, her gaze lingering on the woman as questions began to rise again. Stronger now. "You stayed," she said quietly. "You didn't leave." The woman looked at her for a moment, something unreadable passing through her eyes before she responded. "I said you were safe. I meant it." Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Emily swallowed, gathering what little strength she had. "Who are you?" she asked finally. The question hung in the air, simple but loaded with everything Emily didn't understand. For a brief moment, the woman didn't answer. Instead, she glanced toward the door as if making a decision. "My name is Olivia Hayes," she said at last. The name didn't mean anything to Emily at first, but something about the way she said it felt important. "And this place..." Emily looked around weakly. "This isn't a regular hospital, is it?" Olivia hesitated just for a second. "No," she admitted. "It's private." That much was obvious. Everything about it, from the silence in the halls to the efficiency of the staff, felt different, controlled, almost exclusive. "Why bring me here?" Emily asked. "You could have just taken me to any hospital." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked to the side of the bed, her gaze steady, her voice lower now. "Because I needed to be sure you'd be taken care of," she said. "Why?" Emily pressed, her confusion growing. "Why does it matter so much to you?" And that's when something shifted. Olivia's expression changed. Not drastically, but enough for Emily to notice. The calm, composed exterior cracked just slightly, revealing something beneath it. Something emotional, something personal. Because, Olivia said slowly, her voice quieter than before. This isn't the first time our lives have crossed paths. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia took a step closer, her eyes locking onto Emily's with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. 3 years ago, she began, on a highway outside of Dallas, there was a car accident. Emily frowned slightly, her mind struggling to keep up. I don't. You were driving home late at night, Olivia continued, her voice steady but filled with something deeper now. It was raining. Visibility was low, and then a truck lost control. The memory hit Emily like a sudden jolt. Her breath caught. I remember, she whispered. I pulled someone out of a car. Olivia nodded slowly, her eyes glistening just slightly. That someone was my daughter. The room fell completely silent. Emily stared at her, her mind racing, trying to connect the pieces that suddenly felt too overwhelming to process. She was trapped, Olivia continued, her voice breaking just enough to reveal the weight of that memory. The car was on fire. The paramedics hadn't arrived yet. Everyone else was too afraid to get close. Emily's heart pounded as fragments of that night came back to her. The heat, the smoke, the fear, and the choice she had made without thinking. I didn't even know who she was, Emily said softly. I couldn't leave her there. Olivia took another step forward, her composure finally slipping just enough for the truth to show. You didn't just save her, she said, her voice trembling now. You gave me back my entire world. Tears filled Emily's eyes as the weight of those words settled over her. And tonight, Olivia continued, her voice regaining its strength, when I saw you lying there, I knew I couldn't walk away, not after what you did for my family. Emily shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. I wasn't expecting anything. I didn't even think anyone would remember. I never forgot, Olivia said firmly. Not for a single day. The door opened softly and a nurse stepped in, her expression calm. Miss Hayes, she said gently, the baby is stable now. You can bring her in. Emily's breath caught again. Her? She whispered. The nurse smiled slightly. Yes, a little girl. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she covered her mouth, emotion flooding through her. Minutes later, a tiny bundle was placed carefully into her arms. Emily looked down at her daughter, her heart swelling with a love so intense it almost felt unbearable. The world, with all its pain and cruelty, faded away in that moment, replaced by something pure, something unbreakable. She's beautiful, Emily whispered. Olivia stood beside her, watching quietly. Yes, she said softly. She is? Emily looked up at her, her eyes filled with gratitude, emotion, and something deeper. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Olivia shook her head gently. You already did. 3 years ago, the rain had stopped by the time the sun began to rise, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily realized something. Sometimes the darkest moments of our lives aren't the end of our story. Sometimes they're just the beginning of something we never saw coming.